Hi, I'm Leon the Lover. In this video, I'm going to give you a complete walkthrough into a remix I recently did, including how to make some cool vocoder stabs. I'm also going to show you my favorite plugins for saturation and compression on drums, so let's get into it. Hi guys, it's Leon the Lover. You're listening to my remix of Camiel Daamen's Understand It. Let me give you a little flavor of the original as well. It's a nice dubby deep track. So you can see the original was a little bit tougher, a little bit more minimal, but still had those amazing dub stabs and some cool piano work that I really wanted to bring across into the remix. Normally, I don't love to do remix contests because you spend a lot of time on your remix and it's unlikely that you're going to win. So you don't know if the track's going to be used or not. But in this case, Camiel is such an amazing mentor to the community through his YouTube channel and his interviews with Dive In Live and I loved the original track too. I loved the dub stabs and the piano work. So I just couldn't resist. And I thought it would be a fun one and a great way to get to know Camiel better too. I'll play a few more elements from that original one so you can hear, and then you'll be able to hear them as we go through track by track or channel by channel on my remix. Here's some of the sub bass if you can hear it. Some pads. Definitely a darker feel than what I wanted to do with it.
Understand it.
There's the main vocal, high bass. I like the way it has riffs in there that make it sound like an electric guitar to me. Higher synth bass. Some vinyl noise, of course. And then here's a stab loop. Nice dubby stabs, another stab. And here's that piano solo. The original track was 126 BPM. My remix is 128 BPM. I love the way each of those original tracks has kind of a gritty feel to it. It's really nicely done. There's even some phasing. I guess I didn't have the hi-hats in here because I redid them, but in Camiel's version, there's some nice subtle phasing on the hi-hats and noise, which I just loved. So yeah, let's go through channel by channel. So I organize all my projects this way. I do low at the top, then drums, then synth, and then whatever's left kind of hangs out at the bottom here. So in this track, I'm using a party noise as the background. Very quiet, but you can hear people talking. So that's this underlying background noise through the whole thing. And then I have the original track in the first channel. What I will do, turn off this channel, hit Command K and map 1 to the solo button. Then anytime you hit 1, you can toggle back and forth between your channels and the original reference. great for checking relative volumes at any time. Sometimes I'll have even 2 or 3 references as I'm creating the track so I can match the sound of the drums or take inspiration from the sounds that they've used and try and recreate them. Super powerful way to improve your skills. I guess the other thing I will point out, now would be a good time. I use this plugin called CLANX. It's, if you get it on sale, cheap from Waves for about $25. It basically simulates this studio setup. So I map the letter Q to turn this guy on and off. And so if you're wearing headphones, and this is on the master bus, you should be able to hear my track play through this studio. Let me try that. So that's with the studio. That's dry. Hear how that makes it sound. If you're listening in headphones, it simulates the studio, makes it sound like the speakers are bigger and further away. Do you get this feeling of being in the studio? Which is cool. I find this useful for understanding how all my channels stack together, and it helps me figure out how this is going to sound or simulate how it's going to sound in a real live environment. Oftentimes I find the sounds are less separated in the studio, so it forces you to work harder as you're mixing. Really useful through the entire process to have this thing, you just turn it on and off. So let's say I'm just working on my low end here, kick and bass. Turn it off, sounds fine. Turn it on, it has entirely different sounds. Also very useful. Let's turn on the drums as well. That's off. And that's on. So that is CLANX. There are other similar applications, but this is a very affordable one from Waves. And great to simulate listening to your bigger, wider environment on bigger monitors as you're mixing in headphones. So let's go back channel through the track here. So low bus, I've got nothing on there. Kick. I'm using Joko kick number 9. You can see here in the drum rack, I've trimmed in the end of it. I was probably listening to the original or a reference track and noted that my kick sounded longer, and so I trimmed it up. A little bit of EQ to cut some of the boxy frequencies out of the kick. I don't usually go crazy with that. I'd much sooner rotate through other kicks and see what sounds better. Usually I'm listening to that in comparison to a reference track. Okay, so I've got 2 basses. Basically what I did is slice a sample in simpler. I sliced the original bass and built a different pattern. Play the low bass. It's that basic repeating one. And then this bass fill just comes every few measures, just to add another riff. So I actually am playing one note there, but because this is in classic mode, you get different notes out as you play different MIDI notes. So together, those are glued a little bit with some compression and overall EQ to cut any sub frequencies out of there, or way sub, less than 25 hertz out. This low cut I'll turn on during the breaks. This is a pattern that I do a lot. Here I'm cutting the lows out of the bass for the entire break. Here I do it for the second half of the break. I'll have a similar one on my kick, this one, and just cut the kick during the breaks. It's a very common pattern that I do where I play the kick for half of the break and then cut the lows from the bass and play that for 3/4 of the break and then cut everything out. Okay, this is a trick from DiMarzo, the RC20 on the bass group. This is following the bass and adding a bit of pink noise. You can use any noise that sounds good. Play this with and without. That's very dry, obviously, and this is very noisy. Actually, so the point of this is to give your bass more frequencies so it comes through the mix, that little bit of noise. And it'll bring it through the mix better because there's more high frequency, and also gives it an analog feel as if it was recorded on an actual wire through an actual system that added that noise. So I really like that. It's a simple and organic way to make your bass sound more analog. So I love that. I'm going to do that a lot in the future. You can do the same with erosion. Erosion is a built-in Ableton plugin that does the same thing, adds wide or different types of noise and follows the signal. RC20 was just fun to use that one for a change. Kickstart is the simple side chaining of the kick to the bass, removing the bass by 40% anytime the kick hits. I'll oftentimes slide this back and forth until it starts to have the groove I want. Speaking of groove, let's see if I applied it. Yeah, so Notator 16D is an excellent default. This is also coming from DeMarzo. He recommended this one because he says that it mixes best, and he is a world-class DJ. I will take that recommendation and use Notator 16D all day long. Although I've done other analyses, and a lot of times I'll look at my reference track and I'll choose based on the reference track, but Notator 16D is my default these days. So that's the bass. Let's go through the drums. On the drum bus, let's just play that from here-ish. Drum bus. So Soothe, I use this very sort of naively. I just draw a big arc across and let it remove resonant frequencies. It's hard to even hear the difference. But I know where that helps is especially in the open hat, the noise of the hats. Without that, or at least some manual EQing of those resonant frequencies, it does get quite harsh. Euromix is a fun one. This is a free extreme parallel compression. You notice I've got 0.5% dry wet here. So I'll turn up the dry wet and you can see the crazy compression that this adds. It's just basically a stack of compressors if you open this up. Yeah, compressor, 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 compressor. But how I use this, I think how it was intended, is to provide parallel compression. So it's got a lot of crunch to it, and you mix that in on top of your drums. I'll turn up this dry wet and you can hear it. So just crazy overdriven compression, and that, when layered on top, it makes your drums a little bit more airy and crunchy. I'll back this off until it gets to something normal. So let's put it back to 0.5%. It's just a little bit of crispness on top of your drums, captures those high frequencies and transients and gives them more crunch. So SSLG, this happens to be the Plugin Alliance one. I think you can get these from 3 or 4 or 5 different shops, the same SSLG emulator. I use this for a little bit of compression on the drums and then a little bit of analog noise. So let's turn this off and on. This threshold on the compressor determines when it starts turning on. You see these orange lights start lighting up. It sounds like it's making a little bit louder, but for me it's also kind of normalizing the sounds and squashing it in a way. Reducing the dynamic range is probably a better way to say it, of all the drums. So making it a little bit tighter drum loop, making it feel like all those separate drum channels are sitting together better. And the other thing I'll do with this one is it has this V gain and THD. I forget what those stand for, but it's basically their analog modeling. So the more you turn this up, the more it's going to saturate and add sort of an analog sound to your drums. So I kind of just crank these up. They're very subtle, but I do like a little bit on there. It's kind of just a little bit of seasoning on the drums. Definitely tell the THD pushes it. I'll have to look up what those stand for later. Okay, so that's the drum bus. I have this break filter here too, just like I had those low cuts on the bass and the kick. Basically during the breaks, I filter the frequencies down just to provide contrast. So I'll automate that on and off, turn it on for the break so that it removes frequencies from the drums, and then open it back up by turning it off at the drop. And also similarly add reverb through this break. You can just listen to this. So it sort of makes it sound like the drums are going further away because I've removed frequencies and I've added reverb. And then when it drops back, it's like the drums come up in front of your face again. So just trying to create contrast there between break and drop to keep it interesting. And yeah, add a little bit of suspense to it as well as the drums go away and then slam back. So clap, I'm going from my whatever reference I used, usually, and trying to match that clap. You can see I cut some of the front off of this clap here in the drum rack to make it a little bit crisper, and cut the end off to make it also shorter and crisper. Saturn, I've been using a ton. I picked this up from a video in DeMarzo's group from M-High. Basically, using this as a frequency-dependent saturator. So this is the default mode for Saturn, no preset or anything. You can either crank up the drive and it will add saturation, add frequencies across the entire frequency band, or you can hit the plus sign and start adding frequency ranges and then just crank it up. Really, I'm just using this almost like a frequency-dependent EQ. So all I wanted to do is add 3 dB of higher frequencies above 1,000 hertz to the clap. I don't know if this is even audible, but let me play it and I'll turn this up and down and we can begin to hear it. You hear how that's super smacky? So just in this case, just 3 dB was enough. Whoops. Just adding some high smack to my drums with Saturn. Okay, that was the clap. Under that, I've got a snare that I chopped a little bit off of. I did a similar thing with Saturn, but in this case, I added 8 dB to the lower half of the snare hit. Oh, I actually added 8 there and 7 there. So just making it more saturated overall, and EQ'd off the bottom of the snare. The open hat, very similar, adjusting the length, cutting some of the highs that were harsh. Closed hat, got Saturn going on again. I'm using this probably way too much at the moment because I love it. Adding some body to the closed hat with Saturn. And then panning that left and right just slightly so that it bounces from ear to ear. Gives it some variation. Got a swishy hat on top of that where I really went to town with shifter. Just dialing in the coarse and fine tune, playing with these until I got a sound that I liked. This is just to add, I think of it as texture layering on top of the drums. This guy is a snare fill, more Saturn again. Then in this percussion, oftentimes I'll start with the Sting random sequencer in front of a drum rack full of sounds till I get something that's almost good. And then I'll try to make that do a little bit of call and response with the rest of the track. Some interesting processing on that. More Saturn, erosion for noise. PSP pseudo stereo is one I've seen come up again and again. Basically with this, you can either go through the presets or tweak the frequency in depth until it places the sound a certain distance from your face. This is another ducker, great if you're doing collabs because then nobody has to have Kickstart. You just, when you give them the project, they'll get ducker. This is just going to be, it's not even doing anything. Doesn't really need to, although normally I would sidechain this to the kick and you just use it to duck. There's no kick playing. Just use it like Kickstart. It's Kickstart, but it's maxed for live, so therefore it's more portable. Anyone who opens the project, it's going to work for them. Boosted some frequencies there. A better way to do this would be to carve out this range in Saturn and boost it in Saturn. I've heard that, you always want to use EQ in a subtractive way when you start adding frequencies. Something bad happens, not sure what. Okay, synths. This is probably where we're going to get into some more of the original stuff. This was a bass bleep. Let's first check anything on the channel. No, here's a similar frequency cut through the break as I did with the drums, soothe to remove any resonant frequencies. So this was a bass bleep loop. I think I actually sampled probably one of the Arturia synths. I forget how I made this, but I was probably just fooling around trying to play a melody and then ended up slicing it and then just controlling the notes specifically with MIDI. This guy, what in the heck is that? Okay, so I've just got one filtered. Solo this. Yeah, so I've got one filtered version and one echoed version playing, just to give it a little bit more depth and interest. And the filtered version has some reverb on it. Echo is great because it has this ducking feature, so you can make it duck itself. Probably didn't do too much here. Okay, so simple EQ. Track spacer is brilliant. It's another way just to duck the bass in this case. So you sidechain it to the bass. You turn the attack and release down all the way normally is what I do. I didn't do that here. And then as this channel is playing, track spacer is going to remove the bass frequencies when they hit from this channel. So I'm doing that since this channel has so much low information in it. I want to get that out of the way of the bass and let the bass win. And track spacer is just a really easy dynamic EQ. Do the same thing with the kick. Sidechain to the kick and cut out the kick with this one. Okay, that is the high bass. Get this low pad which builds throughout. This is my own pad, not Camiel's. And I used Analog Lab, it looks like, set on another synth, which is the SEM. It's actually quite a warm sound. Let's listen to it without all my processing. And then we'll add the processing one piece at a time. I like that bright, sort of a think of that as like a new order sound. Nice 80s analog synth sound. And I've got it filtered pretty heavily though. See that? Oh yeah, that opens rhythmically through the track. It's most obvious during the breaks. Then compress it to make it so the dynamic range of that filter opening isn't too crazy. Saturn, it sounds like it's adding back some of the highs a little bit. Yep. Echo on that. Kickstart, although, did I do that? I didn't do that. So this is not sidechained to anything. Should be the kick. Track spacer sidechained to the piano playing to make sure that, because this is taking up a lot of the mid-range, I want the piano to win and come through over the top of this. So track spacer I didn't mention before, but you crank up the amount here. The higher the amount, the higher it's going to remove the frequencies from the other instrument. So you see it light up when the piano's playing, and the line underneath indicates how much it's dipping out, how much it's removing, based on the line above, which indicates what's happening on the sidechained instrument. Let's go play the section one more time. So if I play just the piano, if I can find it, play that with this pad. That makes it really obvious. Whenever the piano's playing, it's ducking the pad so the piano can come over the top of it, which is super helpful and useful. Again, I love these little plugins that make the mixing so much simpler. Okay, so stab rack. Here's where I used some of Camiel's sounds. I just sampled it. I sampled 3 of the stabs into one rack, and then I actually probably used that rack in 3 different MIDI tracks, but this is how I get these stabs playing together. Here. Let's just sample these. Solo these. So that's very similar to the original track. At least I tried to make it so. Funk fill. This is that same as that high bass bleep. This should probably go together with this guy because it's just leading into the high bass bleep. I threw on some Echo Boy basically from Sound Toys to just make it a little bit wilder than the original. The kickstart doesn't really matter in this case because it's playing when the kick is not playing. And that's it. Play that with the one that follows. Yeah, cool. So yeah, I took some sample, like let's actually try and listen to this original show in browser. Like I said, I think I made this with Arturia something or other, one of the crazy synths, probably running in sequencer mode, you know, like an arpeggiator or something. Let's just listen to it. Yeah, so that's one of the Arturia synths playing in arpeggiator mode, and then I sliced it on transients and picked out notes that I liked using MIDI. Pretty cool, if I do say so myself. Okay, so the piano was simpler in terms of processing. There's no processing on that, actually. This is just the original piano, and I went through and chopped it until I had something that sounded like a working melody. And then I doubled it up. I think I made one low. Yeah, this one's an octave higher. Just making it an octave higher made it come through the mix, made it a little bit brighter. Okay, so here I've got something called Juno Pad, but this is just Ableton. Really cool sounds. Don't remember where I got that. You know what that wants is a little bit more vibrato. Dirty tremolo. Vary the volume of it as it hits. Like that, as opposed to. That, and then mix it in. Something like that. So let's add that. I think of that as like a Drew Daps sound.
Understand.
All right, so sorry for the diversion. Had to be a tremolo. So this one is another synth hit. It's kind of a big deep house sound that is coming from Analog Lab. Again, this is Pigments. Didn't really need to do anything. But I do have one of those panned left and panned right. This guy, okay, now we're into an interesting rhythmic part of the track, which is the vocoder rhythm synth. So I've got a carrier for my vocoder, which you don't actually hear. You notice that it's turned off. But on the next track, I've got a vocoder, which is using that channel 29 as the carrier, and then running a drum pattern through it. I'm going to solo that, turn off the vocoder. And that's the drum part that's playing through the vocoder, but then when you play it through the vocoder with that bright synth as a carrier, then you have these awesome chords. And I'm actually not filtering that, which just makes it longer or shorter. So for me, this is a real key part of this kind of modern deep tech house sound, and really fun to play the vocoder, use a bright chord as the carrier, and then run any type of percussion sound you want through it, or just put a drum rack there and start tapping out a rhythm. The trick is to really use that as a call and response with something else. Here, I noticed there was kind of a melody I could hear with it. So I tried doubling it. But I think that was just a little bit too cheesy, so I left it out of the final version. Okay, this vocoder snare fill, I think it's just pumping through the same sound, but a little bit more extreme. It's a different drum beat, I think. It's similar, but different. And so that crazier snare is only used right here in the main break to feed into the main drop. And then I've got a riser. How I made that is by using Crystallizer on top of this vocoder. So Crystallizer is another Sound Toys plugin that's kind of like a bright and shiny reverb. So I resampled that, made a recording of it, and then just feed it into the main drop. And to me, when that's layered in underneath everything else, that sounds like an organ sound. I'll play this whole breakdown one more time when we get through these next couple elements. So yeah, it provides a nice swelling organ sound right into the drop. Here's a string, which you got to have for your house music to create suspense through the break. Just layered in quietly underneath. This looks like a stab. Oh, that's the actual vocal. I'll shut up and play that in a sec. This is a downshifter. Looks like just a white noise playing constantly, and then the filter sweeps over it for a nice little rise and drop into the breakdown. And then this is the last thing. It's a crash. So let me just play this whole thing from here. Got the tremolo turned on too high here. I didn't finish that automation off in the second breakdown, but anyway, I like it. So, and then we got the party background going in the background, subliminally making it a party. Can you hear it? Gotta have it. That or some vinyl noise. Okay, so while we're here, let's go ahead and take a look at what I've been using for my DJ masters lately. Ozone 10, I just upgraded to the latest version. I really like this because you can load in a reference track and then it will match your track to the dynamics of that reference track. So you can see I have actually 3, Hot Night, Obsession, and Sue Control loaded in. And then once you hit the learn button, you can then hear how your track would sound as it matches them to these references. So let me play the drop and then we'll toggle between these 3. That sounds a little bit deeper. Puts the EQ on, see it dipped my overall bass, increased the overall highs. Stabilizer, I don't even know what that's doing, can't explain it to you. Impact, I think, is transients probably. Imager is width. So you can see it added 4 bands and has adjusted the width. It's made the bass narrower. If I didn't make the bass mono, I should have, but it's compensating for that by making the bass narrower and the tops nice and wide. And then it's added some dynamic EQ to cut these sharp frequencies, and then a maximizer to reach the overall volume target that it saw in the reference track. So I love how easy this is. super fast betterizer for my tracks. Normally, all I would do would be to put some compression and check the EQ and throw the limiter on there. But this just, it's so easy to make your track sound really good. So I turn this off and leave this off completely until I've done my mix, try and get my mix as good as possible. And you can turn this on, load some references, and then pick which one you like, which is super easy. And I love the difference that it makes. That's my remix of Camiel Daamen's Understand It. This is currently with the label. I'm waiting to hear back from them. Fingers crossed. It'll be a free download on my DJ list if it's not on the label, but let's hope it goes on the label. Please drop me a comment down below if you have any questions about anything. I will totally respond. And thank you very much for watching. I hope that you understand it.